Hello, class. So, for the last discussion, we have the middle childhood years. This week's readings, I once again didn't really find anything too difficult or troubling to understand. I didn't even really find anything that I disagreed the way that Berger wrote about it. But there are two topics that I kind of have selected to discuss. The first one, I guess, would be my most difficult because it's the one I did the most research on afterwards. But it is looking at testing and measuring the mind, an aptitude test and intelligent quotient tests. And the reason I found this one kind of fascinating in the sense that I wanted to look into it more was just because of how much of our life is dictated by tests. So I'm applying for graduate school, so I had to take a GRE. Most of everyone in the class who's looking at going to a four-year university takes the SAT or ACT. All the way up through high school, you're taking, benchmark tests. You join the military, you take an ASVAB. And these tests, they kind of, are the gatekeepers to whatever you want to do. In the military, you take a test and you have to score high enough in certain areas to get certain jobs. And you don't, then you can't get those jobs. And you look at universities who set I'm applying to Seattle University. The entrance GRE is at 297, which is, it's a moderately high score, I guess. But I took the GRE twice for it, and you look at it and you go, does this really measure my level of academic performance, or does it really just measure what I know at that moment in time, with the day that I had, with what I ate, with how I'm feeling that day? And I think that translates over into the childhood years, into measuring intelligence. And I personally don't think that it's a good measure at all of intelligence. And there's so many other factors that go into, looking at how a child is going to perform. And so the research I kind of found was an article by Maureen Conrad, and it's called Aptitude is Not Enough, How Personality and Behavior Predict Academic Performance. And it talks just about that. What they did is they went through the NEO 5 category inventory, which measures neuroticism, extroversion, openness, agreeableness, and conscientiousness. And they compared it to test scores and course performance. And kind of what they found was that conscientiousness of the five is the most important when looking at, course performance, attendance, and GPA. And so you're looking at personality being just as important, if not more important, than intelligence. Just because someone scores high enough on an intelligence test does not necessarily mean that they're actually going to perform that well in school. This isn't pioneering research, and there's been plenty of other people who have researched, the diminishing effects of intelligence quotient tests. And that's kind of what the book talked about, is how, aptitude is the potential to master a specific skill or to learn a certain body of knowledge. But how do you test for that? And that's kind of what Berger was talking about, is, in theory. And I think it's very ironic that she put that in italics every single time, because it is, in theory, this is the way it'll work. In theory, this is how you measure the mind. But in reality, I don't think it's that easy, and I don't think Berger does either. And I don't think really anyone who is in the main camps of psychology thinks that you can just measure the mind with a simple test. We do it because we need to have some form of measure, but it's kind of one of the lessers of evils, I guess. So that's kind of where I did research, and I'd like to hear your all's opinions on what you think of testing for middle school years all the way up. I kind of talked about this and didn't really focus on the middle school years, middle childhood years, but that in reality, relate to the book. It is a very important thing, and kind of looking at testing in general. How do you test kids? What's an appropriate test? When is an appropriate time to test? And looking at the statistical analysis of it, can you compare kids? Can you compare people? I mean, I know we do, but in theory, you can compare people, but in reality, do you think that we can compare people? So I ask you all, what do you all think about testing and the standardization of testing? Especially you all, you in class who have kids, how do you all view your your kids benchmark tests? How do you view their IQ tests and how that they perform in school? The other thing, the part that I found the most interesting now, getting beyond all of that, it was the bullying section. And the reason that I found the bullying section most interesting was not because I was bullied or not because I was a bully, but I often I didn't really have a large group of friends in high school and middle school. I had a very close-knit group of friends, and we all looked out for each other. As a result, we didn't get bullied. We just kind of kept to ourselves, and as the book says, flew under the radar. But but looking at it, bullying is wrong. And there is definitely, with the access to the internet these days, a whole new scope to how bad bullying can be. And bullying is not something that anyone should ever condone or I guess, try and romanticize. But I think that there is a value that you can't remove bullying in its entirety. And I don't think that that should ever be anyone's effort. Just like everything is a moderation exercise in life, so is bullying. And I think that the reason for that is, and this is where I guess maybe I'll be the controversial one this week, but I think the reason for that is it's a lifelong thing. It's not just kids who are bullied, it's adults. And learning coping mechanisms, learning defense mechanisms, learning anti-bullying mechanisms are a very important part of growing up. I remember when I was growing up, my dad was like, if you're ever bullied, just fight back. And in reality, that's not always the best course of action. It's not always the best course of action to fight fire with fire. Sometimes it works, and sometimes it is effective, but other times it's more hazardous and it's more I guess detrimental to the situation than other courses of action. I'll take an example from Afghanistan. Kind of unrelated, but just to solidify this, there'd be times that we'd get shot at, and returning fire. Okay, great, you're shooting back at someone, especially if you're long range and doing what? I mean, at that range, you have zero accuracy. You're just kind of shooting to shoot. And there was other courses of action, such as finding out the root cause of why we weren't liked in that region and what we can do to stabilize the region to help prevent that in the future. Or even resorting to dropping a bomb, which could equate to getting outside help from a superior. So you look at other courses of action than just fighting fire with fire. And I know my bomb dropping thing kind of was a little exaggeratory, but you get the point. The definitive action isn't necessarily always pushing back. And I think that looking at how you approach bullying in not high school, but in your younger childhood years, is you explain to kids that there are other courses of action, and that being completely submissive and being completely aggressive are not the appropriate actions, and to step in and help someone when they're bullying. That everyone's an equal. There's nothing that makes anyone more special or less special than anyone else, but that it's not necessarily in an effort to prevent all bullying, and you need to have some of that. You need to have some sort of stress in terms of peer group. Maybe bullying isn't the way I'm trying to put this, because I guess I'm trying to relate this to, you're not going to get rid of bullying. I personally think that it's human nature for people who are insecure and for people who need to feel like they have some element of power to bully people. and you're going to have that from childhood years all the way up into your working years and adult years. When I was looking at research for this, I'm finding articles on nurses, bullying nurses, and you're like, who does that? We're adults, but it happens, and it's all the way up. So I don't think that you can sit there and say, hey, we need to get rid of this in childhood years, because then all you're going to do is under-equip your young adults and your adults, because they've never had to deal with it before. It's like an immune system. You experience it, you remember it, and then if it comes up again, you know how to approach the situation then. And it might be different, but you at least have the groundwork. And I think that goes for the bully as much as it does the bullying person. If someone has a bullying personality and they never have the chance to exercise that and to be punished for that and to learn from it, then what stops them later in life when they don't have that sort of someone to control it as much. And so I don't think our effort as parents and caregivers is necessarily and teachers and educators in whatever walks of life we want to be, isn't necessarily to eliminate bullying in childhood years, but it's to control it. And to control it in a manner that makes it so that way it's like an educational point for kids. And that's harder with cyberbullying, just because there's only so much that you can do in limiting the internet. But with kids, it comes down to monitoring and just being involved. But I found that part very interesting, just because of the implications that I think that bullying has for kids and adults. And like I said, with the intelligent quotient, IQ and standardized testing, they're both very interesting to me. But like I said, did more research for the testing, and so I'm be interested to hear what you guys have to say about both of this and your guys' discussions. And look forward to conversing with you all throughout the week. Thank you.